Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. And my God, it has been a very long time since I first wrote that. Um,
Are you thinking
this
about a rewrite?
it's yeah, I mean, I think maybe, yeah, maybe we need to consider it. But I feel like, every single episode that's been the thing. And it had to be said, for now. So it's episode 56 of Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. We're kind of back. It's still like a little tentative. I think we're maybe the morale is slightly bruised after many months of kind of like stalling and being in different spaces and whatever. But you know it has been a very meaningful endeavor. And so we finally had a moment just before I left America, Jai, when I saw you just before you went to Cali, and we were like, yeah, this thing should keep happening. um so here we are. Jai, do you want to give a little context?
We titled the episode Where We've Been. And the initial inspiration for that was to discuss ever so briefly where we've been, like physically, which has made it difficult for us to do the podcast. I know for myself personally, I've traveled more this year than I ever have traveled out in my whole life. And I've literally, I think I've been in like different countries, or I've traveled at least to a different place every single month of this year. And in some places staying 3 weeks, some places 2 weeks, some places a few days and back. And so I've been constantly just on the move. I have a vata body type, and travel like that makes you very
Mm,
vata, kind of like
mm,
crazy and disoriented. And so being in so many different spaces and moving around like that has made me physically disoriented. Like literally not being grounded didn't make
mm,
it easy to ground myself in anything practically like a something like a
mm,
commitment once a week of doing something. But I think more important than the physical movement and the disorientation that came thereof is kind of maybe exploring ever so briefly, ever so briefly where we've been, what has been the metaphysical space that we've been in, that has led also to the stalling or delay of doing more and
mm,
more episodes. And I say ever so briefly because just before we got on, we got on 10 minutes before. This is a shoot the breeze and try to figure out how we're going to unpack the episode. And you
mm,
just spoke very vulnerably, like, I don't know about this, because like, did we just like shoot ourselves in the foot? We've always had a guest on the show to kind of like hold the
mm,
space, and although we've
mm,
allowed ourselves to become vulnerable to a certain
mm,
degree, because it was never really, the camera wasn't really ever truly on us per se. It's always been
mm,
quite easy to like step up to the plate and be vulnerable in a very specific context. But with us
mm,
just interviewing each other and trying to have a conversation with one another about where we've been physically and metaphysically.
mm,
And the answer to that question, if we have to be thoroughly honest, puts us in a vulnerable space that perhaps we're not prepared to encounter or meet just yet, especially in the public space. We were just having this conversation just before we jumped on. I'm just going to share it with the guests who would hear this in the future. But, we're called Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. And the what it takes to be honest, it's not something that you can necessarily show up to every single day. It's not like a bar that can maybe always be reached every single day unless you have a certain level of courage and purity and sort of internal fitness and strength. It's not really a bar that's easy to reach on a regular basis, and certainly it becomes exponentially more difficult in a public sphere.
mm,
For each eye that comes on to the program, that much harder it is to become thoroughly honest, because you don't know who's hearing, how they're taking it, if they're taking it in the right context, if they're really understanding the meaning. It's not a personal conversation with them. And so therefore we will try to discuss maybe ever so briefly, I'm trying to get that camera, where we've been metaphysically, maybe. I think it's an important thing to bring out, if possible for you, if possible for me. I already know, because I was already thinking about it for a few days. I'm like, I'm not saying about I'm like, it's gonna be like a very curated. Yeah, this is where I've been at metaphysically. I was like, I don't know how much I can talk, but I think it is interesting. I think it's an important point to bring up anyway, just for our hearers, just in the context of what the show is called, the Honest Men's Podcast, and our challenge with the extent of honesty we're prepared to divulge in this particular context. I think it could be a fun thing. But we have a really cool thing we want to read to you. It was making its rounds on Facebook a few months ago. It's particularly Padmanabha Swami was sharing this quote, and it started making its rounds on Facebook. It's an amazing quote by Sadananda Swami, who was a German disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And I have it here in my notepad as being real and what does it mean in reality. So we want to read that also. But before that, I've told where I've been physically. Now you can tell where you've been physically. Then we're going to try to explore this metaphysical space a little bit. Briefly, and then we'll jump into the Sadananda thing.
Yeah, 100%. So at the end of last year, on I think it was December 19th, we had like our final episode 52 of our 1 year streak of like doing the podcast consistently. That episode was called 108 Shades of Grey, and it was based on exploring. We did some research. We came up with a questionnaire with some other devotees, Brajananda and Kumari Saki and Danya, and we sent that out like sort of in the second half of last year to try and get a sense of like where devotees are really at pertaining to this the most problematic regulative principle, or perhaps the most difficult one to follow for most people, having this sense. So that's where we ended it off. And then we did agree that we were going to take like, a month or two off. It ended up being 3 months. And then in April, I think it was in April, we did about 3 episodes. We had Deva on, we had Padmanabha Maharaj. It was Padmanabha Maharaj, yeah, it was him. And then Kavi also came on, Kavi Karnapur, the astrologer, and we had those 3 things. So in my case, just physically, I was still in South Africa for the first few months, for the first half basically of the year. But then in that time, April, things started getting pretty heavy for me with my dad, who is currently who has cancer and is dealing with that, and is in a pretty heavy situation in that regard. So things started getting a little bit intense with that, and then I also I was planning to come to the States. That's something that was building up for a long time. In 2020, my main thing really just being locked up at home and still trying to figure out kind of like my occupational situation and stuff, just really hanging out with devotees online. So I in 2020 had the good fortune of really like expanding my network and connecting to a lot of devotees in the States. And so this desire to come to the States has been just building for a long time. And then finally, it became apparent that, midway through the year at the beginning of June would be the time for me to come. So I was kind of like dealing with my dad's situation and also like trying to sort of pack up my life and figure out exactly, because I didn't know coming to the States if I was going to stay, and if I was going to come back. I mean, I felt like, if things got, if it got really serious with my dad, that I would come back for that. But still, I was like, I didn't know exactly why, like exactly what my purpose was for coming to the States, but I just knew that I had to go, right? And so, then Jai, I came at the beginning of June, and we saw each other then, and then I had like a whole. I mean, I flew like 10 times in 2.5 months, like all over the place, just exploring the different communities and following up on connections with different devotees and wonderful people that I've already sort of like connected with. And then but yeah, then it got to a point where I was like, I really, I feel like I need some grounding again. And honestly, I was just missing home a lot. There was like many elements of South Africa that, you know, it's like if you're in the thick of something, and I think this is quite an important principle to lead maybe into more subtle metaphysical things, but it's like you're in the thick of something and you kind of like just start, you know, taking it for granted or whatever. So it's like this principle of taking a step back and getting some distance from something that we may value a lot, or something that may be important or like true to who we are or what we really value. You know, just taking that step back and getting some perspective is a very necessary thing that can be applied in all sorts of ways, whether that be our spiritual life, the different angas of bhakti, whether it be, you know, in my case now, stepping away from home, coming to the States and really like immersing myself in that environment and kind of social milieu amongst the devotees there, to just gain some real perspective and appreciation for what I have in my home country. It's like I needed to come to the States to realize that I am a South African and that I really love South Africa, you know, so many aspects of it. Anyway, so I just got back a week ago, and now it's just kind of like settling in, getting grounded, just trying to establish some good routine for the next few months. And so with that kind of grounding like manifesting for me, I feel like now it's kind of viable again for us to make an endeavor with the podcast intermittently. We're, you know, Jai, we were saying that we probably won't do weekly episodes, like we might do bi-weekly or once every 3 weeks or so, but we feel that some consistency is needed. We've both had this experience of going to different places and just kind of meeting random people who would express a lot of appreciation for this endeavor, you know, just like a lot of upliftment and, you know, and so on. So we yeah, we've gotten a lot of encouragement and appreciation, and there's definitely a distinct flavor here, you know. What we've been able to co-create, Jai, is I think something that has a place in our society. Now I also now want to get to this point of saying, we started this in at the end of November 2020, and it was that's almost 2 years ago. That's just a few months short of being 2 years ago. And just thinking how much has changed in my life since that time, the kind of psycho-emotional transformation or just journeying that I've personally gone through. I'm in a very, very, very different space than I was in back then. And you know, like at that time, Jai, this endeavor sprouted from, you know, you took the initiative of starting the Arise Men's Group, like a sort of like a men's support group for young devotee guys who are serious about spiritual life, but also just struggling with very human things and just trying to figure out yeah, just trying to figure out like what to do with this very um difficult intersection between being a human and also being deeply spiritual. So, you know, that in that space, you know, we were, it was such a valuable experience, and that sense of solidarity between everyone participating and the sense of meaning that we felt there was so pronounced and something very special. And so, you know, you and I were talking one day and saying, you were saying, how did it go? You were saying you were thinking of doing a podcast
You
anyway,
know, Dev
or
Madhava Prabhu had invited a small group of us to Vermont to talk about doing the Bodhika program, this Bodhika
yes.
platform.
Hmm.
And he invited me and he was just like, he just wanted me to do something. That's what he told me. I guess some people appreciate the way that I run my mouth, and David Monroe is one person who appreciates the way that I run my mouth. So he just wanted me doing something. And I said, well, I had started a Rise group at that point. I said, well, it would be kind of cool to have a podcast about this sort of thing. So then I reached out to you, sort of prompted by David Monroe holding a space for creatives to talk about various things. That's how I recall reaching out to you. I don't
Yes.
remember more of the origin story than that.
Yeah. That was basically the thing, and also we wanted to somehow or other take that experience that we were having in the men's group and just somehow make it
Right.
more public, just share it
Right.
like more broadly with people. This kind of upliftment, and so I would say, initially that core purpose was defined as just what does it mean to be a wholesome, like what is wholesome masculinity, like what's the opposite of toxic masculinity, how do you be like how to be like an integrated um young man in this world of today that that is just like the onslaught of degradation and so many destructive elements is just so ever present, right? So how do we navigate our way through that? And so yeah, that was our point, is like having these critical conversations, having topics around that, just how to come to a place of full integrity. So for me at that time, I I had this thought many times. Like I once heard a musician say that, well, I just kind of make the kind of music that I would like to listen to, right? And so I feel like I had this thought many times of, we're kind of making a podcast that I feel I really need to be listening to, like having those conversations that are truly like in personal service. Um, and so, we started November 2020, and then for the first half of 2021, I, whew, that was a super rough time for me materially, because I was trying to figure out my career, my occupation, trying, throughout 2020 and also at the beginning of that year, like trying different things and just like, falling on my face repeatedly. It was pretty rough. And then finally, because having studied counseling and having happened upon relationship counseling specifically, and really resonating with that when I was doing that in my internship, someone reached out, someone close to me reached out and said, hey, try this company, Relationship Hero. And so yeah, that happened, and then midway through last year that finally crystallized, and then like my occupation, my material situation just kind of got stable. But at that time, it was a very interesting kind of like cross section, because by that point, by midway through 2021, that was like about 14, almost a year and a half in of being pretty much isolated in my spiritual
Right.
life, like just being like without community, and because I was really really blessed in that regard before. I mean, since I met the devotees in 2013, I was just nestled in resonant community like all the way through, with devotees, specifically men and brothers, that they became brothers, honestly. And so I just always had that experience. And then COVID, going into the space of isolation, my sadhana eventually just began. I mean, it got to a point where it was like japa specifically, just like really painful, really painful. I was just like so
It's a no for me.
huh.
It's a no for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fascinating, because right at the time when my material situation sort of like stabilized, and I found my career path, and since I began, I feel like I haven't worked a day in my life because it's just such a resonant thing for me, and I feel so in my element doing it, and it's incredibly fulfilling and meaningful. So that happened, but then right at that time, practically also, I didn't think the two were directly related, but at that time I also just got like super fried out with my spiritual practice, and it just it just faded out. It pretty much just faded out. And I just like I tried to like sort of carry on at a lesser standard, but I was just like, I just have absolutely no taste. And then also being at the age of, being 28 at that time, and like having not yet figured out my material situation at all. Basically, all of my eggs had been in the spiritual basket for, practically a decade. I mean, I did manage to do my degree in, a few years earlier, so at least that happened. But practically all my eggs being in the spiritual basket, and just realizing like, I need to figure out my life in this world. Um, it just kind of, at that time, midway through last year, I was just like, I really I really felt like my spiritual life just began to feel straight up irrelevant, to be honest, because I was just like, I really have to endeavor now to just get myself grounded as a human being, and also just to kind of like begin to figure myself out as a human being, because it was the first time in my life that I had a truly like independent situation, where, and with that independence comes the freedom um, to explore and I think explore and express oneself, as one feels inspired to. So, so my life changed dramatically like halfway through last year, and but we still carried on the podcast, right? But and
Right.
it was like having been in the in the like fully in the bhakti space for almost a decade by that time. I mean, I was still like so nestled, like my heart is like still there with the devotees. So, then having all of our guests and having these conversations on our show, like very much still informed by the Vedic perspective and so on, was still a very resonant experience for me, despite the fact that the way I began, to live my life was actually quite different. Um, but it still felt like it was a thing that I could do. And anyway, then we carried on till we did episode 52, and we felt like really chuffed that we had sticked it out like a whole year. And then the first half of this year, lots of stuff in both of our lives. And then I came to America. So coming to the States, was like, I eventually, like, in the process of being there, I kind of articulated to myself, um you know what what the purpose really was, like what I needed, what it was really about. And the way I sort of articulated it was, just strengthening the connections to people that I do have there, getting a sense of what it would mean to live in America, just on a practical level, what it would mean for me specifically, and then just to scope out where I feel most at home. And I will definitely say, shout out to Ypsilanti, the Harmony Collective, Dave Madhava Prabhu, and crew, who just have such a beautiful thing going there. And I definitely felt like if I were to live in the States, I feel like my home would be Ypsilanti. I just felt so at home there. It was really wonderful. But it did get to a point. Okay, so this is the other aspect where I was like, okay, for a year from midway 2021 until I went to the States, I haven't been like spiritual much. And I was like, okay, so let me put
Sure.
myself like no, this is like a typical Karuna move. Like I'm such an extremist. So like not being in a totally different like kind of freestyle space, and then like, okay, I'm gonna put myself in the thick of like devotee association and see how that goes. And in the beginning, especially, like it was it was hectic. It was really, really hectic, you
In
know,
what
putting it.
way? Hectic.
Oh, bro, like I just felt like such an imposter, you know. I just felt like such an imposter. I felt like, because you know you're with devotees and they talk about Krishna and stuff, you know, and they like ask you how you feel about Krishna, and they're like, like chanting the rounds and like doing the whole thing and like donning the dhoti and wearing the tilak and whatever. I'm like, yo, I haven't done this for a year, you know, and now suddenly I'm there and it's just like, you know, because you gotta blend, like you can't be, it's uncomfortable when you're not like slotting into the culture that surrounds you. And I'm there and I'm like, it's like I just haven't been here at all, everybody. But I mean, I'm gonna put the dirty on because I mean it's like, you know,
I
I'm
need to
not
fit in sufficiently to not
you
get
know,
mad.
so anyway, yeah, it was rough. So, you know, and I was like, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself the best association that I possibly can, by being with the devotees, like the devotees that I connect with the most, you know, and then I'm going to see if that association kind of catalyzes a kind of a spiritual reinvigoration, or just like an inspiration to, to live the bhakti lifestyle again. And I was there for 2.5 months, and that didn't happen. Yeah, that didn't happen. I mean, I was there. I had all the opportunity. Especially with certain people, I was like, wow, like spending time with Dave Madhava and Ypsilanti was
Mhm.
just. I mean, my God, Prabhu, if you listen to this ever, like, big love. I hang out with Dave Madhava, Prabhu, and I'm just like, I feel like he just brings the best out of me. But unfortunately, I can't hang out with Dave Madhava Prabhu 24/7. And it's like what to do with those in between moments,
Right.
what to do with those in between moments. So yeah, I mean, I just realized that I'm just not there yet. I'm just not there yet, just in terms of like reintegrating into a very sort of like committed bhakti lifestyle. And then also just on the real, I would have had to come back to South Africa also, just to be with my dad again in his in this very difficult part of his life. So I was just like, okay, well, I'm not gonna try and like push something that I'm not really feeling after like 2.5 months of like really um being in the thick of it. And Jai, I think, like, yeah, maybe we should read that article, because I feel like it's gonna. I also like just
I want to
reading it
say
again
something on
today.
this though. I want
Yeah, yeah,
to look.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think this is a great space. First of all, love you, bro. I love how you were so nervous to speak. You don't know to what extent you will be able to be vulnerable, but it's just like your intrinsic position, and
Mm,
you just very seamlessly just moved from where you were physically into what was happening to you metaphysically, and giving like the full extent of, maybe not the full extent, but a pretty clear picture of where you're at metaphysically. And it's very powerful. So hats off to you. It seems like something that's very easy for you, and I don't think that it's easy by itself, but it seems easy enough for you, like, or very natural. I don't think you meant to say all of that. At least the way that you were speaking to me before we got on, it was like, I don't know,
yeah.
I'm about to hang myself. I'm
I
nervous. I don't
mean,
know if I want to do
yeah.
this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just like, firstly, thank you. Like, thank you for that. I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, ask Jai. Like, I got into the studio, like into our little virtual studio. I'm like, bro, I feel like I'm about to hang myself out to dry here. Like, I was incredibly nervous, because I kind of I have this thing where I really can't help, but like, it's like I call it like involuntary vulnerability. It's like I just this is the thing that I've always done. The way that I make sense of my existence is to like verbalize, what's going on in my heart with people that I trust. And Jai being one of my most beloved human beings, and a very dear friend, bro. Like you make it so easy for me. So I mean, I think also like you just being there on the receiving end and knowing, like Jai is so interesting because he said he describes himself as like a old school Hare Krishna, but like then on the other end, you're like maybe the like one of the most non-judgmental people that I've ever met, you know, but despite the fact that you have this like incredible adherence to like truth with a capital T, you know. So it's just, you know, I'm also just grateful to you because you always make me feel like I could just be myself, you know, and share my heart. And I do realize, you know, we have some people here with us, and I guess quite a few more that will hear this. But anyway, I yeah. So just I guess I'm just happy and grateful that I've kind of come to a point right now where I feel comfortable to just be. You know.
You're the hero of this episode. But I wanted what I wanted to say, hearing your story and just reflecting it from my perspective also, is that you and like all of us came to like a crisis point, you know. And the crisis point, as far as I understand, looking at the root of the word in Greek, it's whatever it is, but it means like a decision has to be made, and the decision you make at the crisis point will have significant impact for the next several months, several years, several decades, you know, depending on the sort of decision you make at the crisis point. And so, hearing your description, you were clearly brought to a crisis point where your material life concretized right at the point where your spiritual life was also becoming viscerally irrelevant for you. And so it's like a very clear crisis point, and you made a certain decision at that point that's having its momentum, that's playing itself out right now. And I think in life we come to many of those crises, but I think in old cultures they had rites of passage to help individuals move through crisis point with greater dignity and grace.
Yeah, I like the way you articulate that.
And we've lost those rites of passages, so we're like, it's literally like a exploring thing for us. We don't really know what we're doing. We don't have a lot of the tools. We don't have a lot of the community. We don't have a lot of the wisdom to help us through those crisis point. And that's something I resonate with very deeply, because I think the lockdown brought many people to a crisis point. I know I certainly experienced I would say many crises. Anyway, I sometimes say ghetto word crises.
Crises with just like with an E at the end. Yeah, crises.
And, I remember being in North
I love your ghetto words, by the way.
I think they're great. They're just funny because I said a word. I'll drop like a really powerful like vocabulary word no one's ever heard before, like ineluctable, and then I'll say crises.
Yeah, bro. yeah, and then like you make these Facebook posts, and then you use like these Maha words, but then you make like 4 spelling errors, and I'm like, bro, like what?
I think there's like better editing.
hey, Jai, hold on. Okay, we need to just take a quick pause. You were saying like everyone's crisis in 2020. Okay, that's where we're at. Just earlier, Nam was saying that your audio is a bit faint. I'm wondering if you could maybe plug some headphones into your iPad. Maybe like if you speak through the headphone mic, if that would be better.
I don't have headphones like that plug into the iPad. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay.
So I still have my fancy mic, but my computer died. I had to get a replacement. For some stupid reason, I went for an iPad instead of like a MacBook Mini, which is what I usually get. And it doesn't have like the USB plugins and so on. So I have to get like an adapter and
just keep your face like super close to the screen like this all the time.
I'm so sorry. It's gonna sound whack. Anyway,
It's okay. It's not like I don't think it's like you know that people can't hear you at all. Yeah. You know, it's just anyway. Okay, cool. Okay, carry on. So 2020 COVID crisis.
I'm in North Carolina, and at the time, because I didn't want to be stuck in New York during the whole lockdown and political things that were going on. So I was in North Carolina, and you know, my practice was just starting to be a real struggle. I'm a pretty like self-motivated person when it comes to my spiritual life. I don't need like loads and loads of encouragement to keep to my practices, but I did notice that I was having an increasingly more difficult time feeling enthused about spiritual practice. I was living with some friends at the time, great friends, but they weren't practitioners. They were all devotees, but they didn't practice. I call them non-practicing devotees, and they were great. I loved being with them, but I I wasn't getting any support. So I came to like a little crisis point at that time where I was just like, okay, I need to make a decision that's probably going to have a little bit of impact in terms of my spiritual identity, at least.
Mm.
And, I was like, I need more support. Like the way I articulated it at the time is like, I need more support of the internal energy in the form
Mm.
of practicing devotees.
Mm.
Even if I don't fully jive with them, I need the support of everyone chanting,
Mm.
16 meaningless rounds, even if it's meaningless, like 16 meaningless. I need that. I need to be around at least a little bit of that energy to give support to my
Mm.
bhakti, because bhakti, as we say it theologically, is the internal energy. And so you can't, literally you can't do bhakti. Bhakti can come through you, but you can't perform bhakti. And so I was getting like a visceral sense, like I can't do bhakti. I need to actually be supported by the internal energy for there to be an actual unfolding of devotion in my life. So at that point, I decided to like just up and leave. Suddenly, I just left North Carolina. I came back to New York. Bhakti Center had just opened back up. And so I was like, okay, there's the opportunity to do seva again and be in the internal energy, be before Radha Muralidhar, be before chanting devotees and so on. And that, and then that kind of gave a little bit of a reinvigoration. But since
Mm.
being back in New York, yeah, there's been a lot of just this life vicissitudes taking place where it's basically bringing me to another crisis point. It's like just now coming. I wouldn't say I'm fully there yet, but I'm like just on the precipice of, I think, a major transition. And I'm also getting a little bit older. I'm not going to tell my age because a lady doesn't tell her age in the public sphere. But I'm definitely getting a little older, and I'm getting around that point where a midlife crisis can take place,
Mm.
like the
Mm.
general
Mm.
age range. I'm coming to that range. Never heard any older devotees talk about this with me. Obviously, that's probably something I might have to seek out. But it's not like we have a lot of guidance about how to go through a midlife crisis. In my Guru Maharaj's ashram, his ashram is very famous in India. He has loads of brahmacharis there, and from who have been there since the 90s. And
Yeah.
suddenly, like in the
The
first,
Exodus.
yeah, the first decade of the 2000s, leading into the second decade, there was this huge exodus of devotees who had been in the ashram for 20 years, 25 years, I think even some 30 years. They're all just leaving. And so I asked
Mm.
my Guru Maharaj about this. And I said, well, was it due to midlife crisis? That was my question to him. And he said, yes. And so then I asked him some questions about how does one navigate a midlife crisis. So I got a chance to hear some sort of abstract ideas around that. But you kind of need more than abstract ideas to really engage with a crisis like that at that juncture in your life. And I feel like I'm getting closer to that juncture, or just on the
Mm.
precipice of it. And a lot of things are starting to shift around me. And I'm like aware of it. I'm like sensitive to it, but I don't know exactly how to respond to it just yet. And
Mm. Mm.
so I've been traveling this year, so I've been physically not grounded. And metaphysically, I also feel like, okay, something's just about to happen. And I don't know if I have the tools to respond to that with dignity. I
Mm.
don't know where that's going to lead me. I don't know what the
Mm.
sort of decision I'm going to make at that point, and what is it going to be, its impact on my practical life, and for me,
Mm.
most importantly, on my spiritual life. I'm leaving to Govardhan at the end of this year, or end of the September. I'm going to
Mm.
Govardhan. I'll be in Govardhan for 2 months, and I'm literally just going to Govardhan because I'm part of it is because I'm always trying to get to Brudge as much as possible, as soon as possible. That's just like my MO.
It's
But
really your home,
yeah,
that
it's really
place.
my
If there's
home.
one place that's your home, it's Brudge for sure.
Yeah, so that's part of it. But some of it is like fear, because I'm like, all right, this thing is coming up for me, and I don't know what it is exactly, and what's its impact going to be on my practical life, and most importantly, on
Mm.
my spiritual life. So I'm kind of
Mm.
like nervous about it. And so being nervous about all of that, and then just like, then you're like, hey, Jai, you want to do the podcast? And I'm just like, fuck, like, I don't know if I could take another thing. I'm like scared. I don't know what's happening. I don't necessarily have support to get me through this period per se. Interestingly enough, Krishna has sent a lot of older men right at this time who've just suddenly taken some interest in me,
Wow.
like
Wow.
a few gurus and a few older men who are just who are like Some are like super, like their bhakti game is on fire. And you got like
Damn,
a
bro.
couple of sannyasis and just a few older men that just suddenly appeared in my life. And I'm thinking as Christian, like responding to my fear that I don't
Mm.
have the necessary support and tools to get me through what's
Yeah.
coming. I'm hoping that's the case. Part of me is going to Govardhan to meet some of these older men who will be there to talk to them like, hey, I think this is coming up for me and I'm scared. I don't know how I'm going to engage with that. And so that's been, because every time we met, you're like, hey, do you want to do the podcast? I'm like, yeah, yeah. It was a
Ah.
lot of that nervous,
Ah.
because it's like this nervous energy for me. And I
Yeah.
don't know what's about to happen to me. I'm
Yeah.
nervous. I don't know what's going to be its impact on
Mm.
my identity. I think I'll always be a devotee. Like I'm at this point, I'm fully sold out. I don't know what type of devotee I'm going to be though. And I want to
That's
be,
exactly how I feel right now. Like that's the
yeah,
key thing that I keep telling myself. Yeah,
yeah. So I
totally.
want to be a devotee. I want to be a devotee. Like that's really my ideal. I have certain romantic ideas about what I want to be as a devotee, and I don't know if I'm gonna have that this life even, and especially with this new period coming up for me, I don't know what it's going to mean. And so
Yeah.
that's been my trepidation about, like, I don't know if I can commit to something, because if I get suddenly like whacked in the face by destiny, by
Uh-huh.
fate, and suddenly
Mm.
I've committed to something, but now I have to pull out because I just not able to engage with fate with great dignity or meaning at that
Mm.
time. So
Mm.
that was been my trepidation around this. And then and I think this is why I wanted to read the Sadananda thing, because
Okay, but before we
yeah.
get there though, like I got things to say. Okay, do you want to say something
No,
more?
that was fine. I wanted to say the reason I wanted to get, because I think a part of the being in a crisis point, a
Mm.
part of the trepidation or fear or concern that comes up for me, and I think what I was also hearing as you were speaking, is that the way that we view like failure, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like I think
yeah.
like the reframing of how we view failure is kind of going to be critical, and how we come out of these spaces, having been improved by it. And we were in a sangha, because we know we have this
Mm.
Bhagavatam man sangha, and we were in one of our sanghas a few weeks ago, and this devotee, in the context of our conversation, said failure is God. I think he was quoting something, but he said failure is God. But it just imprinted itself on my psyche very strong, because, and this is kind of why I had the inspiration to read the Sadananda thing, because a
Mm.
reframing of how we engage with failure, because part of the trepidation is like, oh, I'm not going to be a good devotee. I'm not going to be like, what's going to happen? Am I going to be a
Mm.
failure materially? Am I going to be a
Yeah.
failure spiritually? And the impact of the sort of narratives that we have around failure is making it harder to come through the crisis point like dignified. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to read the
Yeah.
sudden. That's how I got the inspiration to suggest this to you. Like, hey, let's read the sudden another thing, because
I mean, I was totally, when you first shared it with me in your room like a few weeks ago, I was like, yeah, we definitely, I was thinking like we should bring this to the podcast and have a discussion around it. But I just want to say, just to two things that you've said, like finally, okay, so like the whole failure thing, um, I mean, for me, it's also, I think my trepidation also coming here right now, having sort of like um being on a bit of a detour from my spiritual practice, is to come here and say this, and then sort of like, have people think of me as a failure, because it's like, you can say, like, anyone can say whatever the hell they want to, but like, we care what other people think about us. Everybody does. Everybody does. It's just a fact of human nature. Do not tell me that you don't care what people think about you.
right,
Like, it's because I mean, even just on a basic level, we need to be regarded positively by other human beings, because
right.
otherwise we ain't gonna have a social life, and that is a problem. Anyway, okay, just a quick statement there. Jai, you were saying like, because you were like, okay, I don't know exactly what kind of devotee I want to be, but then you're like, but I definitely want to be like a devotee. So then I was just thinking like, how would you define that? Does devotee mean like 16 rounds, four eggs? Like, what
Oh, no,
exactly
no,
does
no,
that
no, no,
mean?
no, 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 no. Okay, yeah. So, um, per, if I had to crystallize it more specifically, there's devotion informed by vidhi. We call it as Vaidhi Bhakti. The vidhi means the
Mm.
rule. So for Vaidhi Bhakti, the spirituality is in the rules, and our ability to follow the rules, perfectly is where the Vaidhi Bhakta will find a lot of their inspiration. That's where they find their security in the vidhis. They find their spirituality in the vidhis, their security in the vidhis, and even when they're not feeling necessarily internal inspiration from the vidhis, they will never abandon them, or they'll never
Mm.
like shift gears and like, maybe I need to adjust a little bit because this isn't really working. Is I always find it interesting, devotees are fond of quoting this statement, I guess it's attributed to Einstein, that insanity is doing the same thing in the same way and expecting a different result. Devotees say this all the time, and I never challenge it, of course, but in my head I sometimes like, well, you chant 16 rounds in the same way and you're getting the same result, like no taste, and you're
Mm-hmm.
still carrying on like that, like,
Hacking
what?
it out, bro, for years and years
And
and
I'm like,
years.
is that, does your definition of insanity apply to that also? You're like,
Yeah.
because it seems to me
Yeah.
that sounds insane, that you're just gonna. But the Vaidhi Bhakta, his security and his strength is in the vidhi, so he'll never
Mm.
abandon. He'll never like shift
Mm.
courses and like, hey, I need to try something else. It isn't working. I
Mm.
don't find that sort of devotion very inspiring. I've been doing that sort of devotion for some 20 years now. I don't find it particularly inspiring. Um, I and I've heard from the pulpits how just keep at it. Eventually it will turn into taste one fine day, and I'm like, I'm sorry, nigga, I don't trust you. Like, I don't trust you because like I literally saw you sleeping in Joppa. Like
Prem
I
Vilas is
literally saw
also
you
laughing
sleeping.
with us.
I literally saw you sleeping in Joppa, and you've been around for 45 years. So I'm no, 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 no,
Bro,
no.
can I just say something right now? Like, I am psychophysically incapable of sitting down and chanting japa. I fall asleep after like 5, 6, 7 mantras, guaranteed. Like, it's just, oh, bro, it's always been such a struggle, you know?
And
Okay,
this
anyway.
has made me, just this is a little bit of an aside, but it's made me a little bit more reflective about the relationship that we have with Guru. I think the template of Guru that we have in our devotional community of ISKCON is the superhero Guru, the Acharya,
Yeah.
Prabhupada. But the more traditional Guru culture was very local, and it was extremely intimate.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so you could go to a guru and it's like, yo, this ain't working for me. And then on their able guidance, looking at your
Like, do the
psychophysical
tweaks, bro.
tweaks to help. So it's made me a lot more reflective about that the need for the return of the sort of original guru culture, where it's very
Yeah.
local, very like
100%.
yeah,
Mm.
very intimate, very vulnerable, where you can make adjustments. It's not the guru culture of the industrial revolution, which is like
Mm.
institutions where they're concerned about mass production, and therefore every
Mm.
product has to be uniform. There could be no deviation. And so
Mm.
institutions tend to reflect that tendency. Just what are the numbers
Mm.
coming? Are we creating a uniform product? And so you
Dude.
create this product of devotees who find their spirituality in the rules. They'll never deviate, even if it's not working for them on a visceral level. And I'm not
Mm.
saying, like, listen, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it's not inspiring for me. And this is part of
Mm.
my own experience of crisis right now. So when I
Mm.
say, your question to me is, what is it do you mean when you say a devotee? I mean that when I, just to say it frankly, and this is not to get into this topic so much, but a devotee, as I understand it for the tradition and as I understand it personally, is the rag bhakta. The rag bhakta means one whose devotion is impelled by his actual raga or attraction for reality. And
Yeah.
that rag devotee, as Rupa Goswami informs us, that rag devotee also follows vidhis, but his spirituality isn't in the vidhi. He's following the vidhis because, hey, this is going to help me get that object of my attraction. That's why I'm following the vidhi. It is not because my spirituality is in the vidhi itself. And and so, and then how that really translates, at least for the tradition and how I understand it, because that was your question, is that outside I'm doing my acts of devotion, I'm doing my hearing, I'm doing my chanting, I'm doing my smarna, etc. But internally, I can envisage myself as one of Krishna's beloveds in a particular. And when I say envision myself as one of Krishna's beloveds, I don't necessarily mean necessarily I have the image of myself as like a gopi or a gop or something, but
No,
I have the
it's
I
like
have the image of like the love that or attraction that I have for Krishna. There's like an image of that love, and that
mm,
image of that love, whatever it is that I
mm,
have for
mm,
Krishna, or at least the image of that love for which I have attraction for, is the
yeah,
only motivating factor for my actions and devotion. That's for me what
100%.
it means to be a devotee.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
just going on like and following the vidis is not exactly activating that. So I'm needing to shift gears. I'm getting older. I don't want to be that devotee that's been around 45, 50, 55, sleeping in japa. Like, listen, I'm not trying to be shady. It's not shady. I'm scared. I'm literally scared. Like, I don't want to, like, if I have to waste my life, there's so many other ways I can waste it, but I don't want to waste my life thinking that I'm doing something meaningful, but I'm like a hamster in a hamster's wheel, not going anywhere. And so I'm
100%.
kind
Yeah.
of I'm getting scared as I'm getting older. The fear is becoming more tangible. That I'm not really progressing internally, and I need to do something about that. I can't just do the
Mm,
same thing in the same way. I need to become a
mm,
devotee. That means the inside and the outside is really matching wonderfully and beautifully. That's what I mean by
yeah.
becoming a devotee.
So what I'm hearing is that the definitive element is really like having an authentic desire, and let me call it like an unrelenting curiosity for what would it
I like
feel
that.
like to be with Krishna, you know, and in whatever capacity, just to have this unrelenting curiosity to really discover that, and that there is like that it's just gotta feel real internally,
Yeah.
so that
I
and
I I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just really love that you were inspired to use that phrase, an unrelenting curiosity, because part of my thinking process is this journey for me right now
uh-huh.
is I'm really into the geeky stuff, the taxonomies of the theology and the metaphysics and the ability to break things down. But one thing I've observed, and I asked Bhakti Vigan Goswami about this in Govardhan in February, the more devotees know or feel that they know about reality,
Mm,
it somehow is causing their fervor of devotion to be muted. Because now
mm,
I know what reality is. It's like in the palm of my hands. And so,
mm,
as a result of that feeling of knowing, I said it seems to me on a personal level, and I feel like I observe it vicariously, that there's like a muting. I call it like their devotion is muted. Like something's going on there, but it's muted. It's not really loud enough. Christian can't really hear it because I know what the absolute reality is. If you ask them a question, super clear answer. They have the metaphysics to tell you everything. Whereas I go to the church, I don't do it so much like I used to. I used to go to the churches a lot here in New York when I needed a quiet place to chant, because Hare Krishna Temple ain't a quiet place for chanting. So I would go to these Catholic churches because they would be empty, and there would be a few people in there praying, and
uh,
I would be in the
uh,
corner of the Catholic church, like judging them. Oh, they don't know Sambandha Gyan. They don't know the Tattva. They don't
uh,
know this, that, and other. But they literally sit there and praying with like such fervor.
uh,
And I
uh,
had this experience being in Chicago when I was in the Chicago monastery. There was this Mexican dude. I kid you not. He looked like no tea no shade, but he looked hella stupid. Like fit like just like physically. He looked like not so smart.
yeah,
He looked dumb. He looked dumb.
yeah.
And his voice was like super high. He just didn't look very intelligent. He would go to the Catholic church across the street from the temple for some time, I guess. He would come to the temple and Kishore Mandir, Chicago. He would pray for 5-6 hours continuously in front of the deities. And I'm talking about vocal prayer. He would be in front of the deities in a like prostrated obeisance position, and you could hear him. Couldn't understand when he spoke only Spanish. Couldn't understand when he was 5-6 hours continuously. And I was like,
Damn.
I've not seen a single devotee do that in the, my experience in the ashram or anything. I never did that. So I'm like, how now this guy, he looks practically dumb. He does, I'm pretty sure he doesn't know all the tattva and the intricacies. But there was like this profound fervor that I need God. God is
It ain't matter, bro, because he's
right.
feeling it. He's feeling it,
So just the
right?
contrast of these two sort of archetypes for me is causing part of my crises. Like that. This doesn't mean I dismiss the value of someone. Again, I will never dismiss that. Our acharyas have worked so hard to give us proper knowledge by which we can move towards the absolute truth, and I don't take that for granted by neglecting to read their books. Which I think is a disease that could be there in our communities, taking it for granted by negligence. I don't neglect that. At the same time, your language. So coming back to your language, why I cut you off, and I apologize for that. But this unrelenting curiosity is just speaking. That's just such a perfect phrase. That it's not that now I know the absolute truth, and therefore my
It's just like
curiosity has been
yeah,
done away with.
yeah,
And this
yeah,
has been part of the
yeah.
destruction of the scientific community, for example. They feel that they've demystified existence just because they can explain a few things very, very well. Therefore, they now know everything about existence, even though they can't tell you why there's existence instead of no existence. Their sense of demystifying, their sense of demystifying reality is the very, or at least part of the very cause of the destructive force of science in the world today. There's no more mystery. And now, because there's no more mystery, there's no need for fervor and no need for prayer and no need for grace to come down into our life and reveal itself to us, because now we know what it is. And so sorry, that phrase, I had to write it down. Like, this is the phrase I was looking for: unrelenting curiosity. Not that now I've read the Sundarbas, now I got this, now I know what the absolute truth is. And so I'm because my fervor for the truth was so much stronger when I first started. At least it feels that way. I'm probably missing something here. I don't think it's true, but it felt like my fervor and curiosity for truth was so much deeper. And now that I know something, it's muted. And now I'm getting older, and that knowledge is proving itself to be a javelin in the stomach. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he speaks about this in relationship to mundane knowledge. What is the use of my mundane knowledge? It's like a javelin to the heart. It's not saving me from samsara. But I'm like, I don't know. Does this apply to spiritual knowledge that remains unrealized potential for the entirety of your life? Will it not be like a javelin in the heart, because you never really were able to be transformed by it? And as you get older and older, that question starts to press on your heart a lot harder. It's kind of fun and games when you're younger because you got time, but as you're getting older, you're still unrealized potential mess.
Sense of urgency, bro. Yeah. But basically, Jai, what it comes down to is, if whatever you're doing in your spiritual life, whatever practice you have, if it is not leading to a feeling of inspiration to genuinely turn yourself toward God, then what is the value? What is the value? And it's like I sometimes observe people in other traditions, with various practices. Like here in Africa, like there's a lot of singing and dancing in like church spaces, like you get like people that come together, and they're like, and there is so much feeling, there's so much emotion, it's so real. And it's like, the Sufis also, like, we are very fortunate. When I was in LA with Yamuna Bihari and Leela, there we had this one, where there was that thing. We had they had some Sufis come over, and it was like kind of like bringing the two traditions together and like sharing mantra, and also like the kind of chanting they do. And I was just observing, like, some of the local Sufi people in Morocco, because they showed us a video. So much feeling, so much feeling. So that is really the thing. Like, if you ain't feeling it, something is wrong. And then you got to really seriously consider what you're doing. And it's just one brief thing, because we really need to read this thing, because it's beautiful and it's going to lead to like more conversation, like a lot of juice there. But it's just, we have a social culture in our Krishna conscious society. I mean, I guess I will speak specifically about ISKCON because that's my main sort of exposure. I mean, there are these other sanghas and there's integration that's starting to happen now. But let's just say at least like ISKCON social culture, it's just like there's this mold of how you're supposed to look and how you're supposed to be, just the mold, right? And it's just like I ain't feeling the mold, you know? It's not working for me. So anyway, okay, shall we read the thing?
Let's begin. Yes.
Okay, okay. I I've got it. I've got it. Do you want me to do it? I've got it here, and I kind of feel like I want to do it in a dramatic way, you know?
Please, I bet it.
Okay. One sec. All right. So, Jai, maybe you could just briefly say the author of this piece, Sadananda Maharaj. Maybe you could just say just something brief about who he is.
I don't really know the details of his backstory. He's a German disciple of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta.
Uh-huh.
I guess he's famous for having gone into India.
Mm,
I feel like I read his biography some years ago, but gone into India and exploring, the different traditions of India, and then coming upon Gaudiya Vaishnavism, seeing a god that plays a flute. So a god who only plays must be the all-powerful God, because you can only play to the extent that you're powerful. To the extent that you're not powerful, you have to work before you can play. So if you're a god that only plays, then you must be the all-powerful one, where you have so
wow.
much power that all you have to do is play. And then somehow discovering Srila Bhakti Siddhanta and taking initiation from him. I think one of the
Mm,
only Western followers of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta at that time. And his writing, I have one small book that was gifted to me by Lokaram and Ishmalanti, and just a few other things I've encountered. Yeah, he just, characteristic of a lot of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's followers, just very like highly educated, and the way
mm,
they use the language is very piercing.
mm.
So you feel a little bit called out, but kind of in a positive way, by the way
Yeah.
they use the language. They shine light on something that you would have otherwise maybe missed or tried
Mm,
to turn a blind eye to. So
mm.
I can't
I
say
mean,
enough. I would have been
th-
well.
that was a great intro, and I was super inspired. Like, when you first read it to me, it was just mind blowing, and just reading it again today, I feel so much resonance. Okay, here it goes. Why does religion seem to harbor and foster the lowest and most deplorable examples of humanity? They say, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. But why? How can it be that such a noble pursuit produces such a contrary effect? Where is the justice or righteousness in that? Where and what is good if the blatant pursuit of such produces something so vile and detestable? What is the point of trying if one will only move backwards? And if so many have fallen in that arduous undertaking, how will I be any different? Does it mean that the quest itself is a farce, an imagination? Is it merely a hopeful dream? The silly machination of ignorant children longing for sense in a senseless and cruel world? By the way, Jai, just interrupt me when you want to say something.
Yeah.
And and why is spiritual pursuit so difficult anyway? Why is it so hard to be good? Why does it feel that everything is stacked against me? Why are my successes so meager and my failures so vast? Where is inspiration? Where are the answers? Why can't I even do all the basic little nothings right?
Like a
Am I just,
Kaddishi, like a Kaddishi. Oh
oh,
my
bro,
God. Okay, anyway.
all the little things, and like our tradition, oh my God, bro, it's just so many little, it's like these little, am I just broken? Am I unfit for progress? How will I ever make it? I seem to have only moved backwards. What I perceived as success before, I now see as the tightening of the python's embrace. At first warm, snug, even comforting. But now it chokes me and I can no longer breathe. What's more, I found myself in deeper despair than I ever even knew before.
I think it just summarizes the religious practitioner's experience in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
bro, 100%. At least the honest and self-aware religious
Right,
practitioner
right,
who doesn't simply mechanically bury themselves in like the, um going through the motions, right?
right.
So it is that I think I've actually paddled the wrong way this whole time. I swam towards the wrong thing. From the very start, my motivation was never on the mark. I sought to embody ideals. I sought to live up to standards. I sought to erase my inadequacies and live in a world where I am good and right and proper and fair. A world where I am okay. That's what I sought. What I still seek. I seek justifications for why it was all okay, why actually I never messed up at all. I sought to improve my inherent goodness and vindicate my motives. I sought to pad my ego. This whole time, it's been about me standing in haughty denial before the entire world, an actor and a hypocrite hiding in plain sight behind his own devices, seeking to twist his trial into a verdict of total innocence and acquittal.
I love this. It's just such a spin because when he opens this paragraph, he's like, I sought to embody ideals. It's like, yeah, right. That makes sense. Like, what's the problem there? And
Of
then as he
course.
as he goes on, he kind of exposes a shadow part of what's going on with the desire to embody ideas. And it actually gives me an appreciation for how a lot of the acharyas in their books, they speak with this like what appears to us to be like an unrelatable humility about being
Yeah.
how fallen they are in this and then we're like, bro,
Yeah.
but you're
Yeah.
embodying the ideal. How can you be fallen? And
Yeah.
then Sadananda Swami is
Yeah.
giving insight to like the shadow side of what's really going on when we're trying to embody ideals. And I just was like,
Yeah, and
whoa,
that shadow side only really becoming real or becoming like visceral like some years down the line, right? Because
right,
I mean, it's like new devotee syndrome, it's like you see these people coming to Krishna consciousness, and I think that the main characteristic of that sort of like psycho-emotional space is just the sense of relief.
right.
Like people come and they're just so relieved to have found something so profound and comprehensive philosophically, and just like also like you just get that initial mercy, but then just give it a little bit of time and then you're going to really face yourself. You're going to start really facing yourself. Now, this next paragraph I really love.
Yeah.
And that is exactly where I think the heart of the issue lies. We are not meant to be good. We are not meant to be proper. We are meant to be real.
Mm.
And real is devastating. Real is not acquittal. Real is to admit and to repent. After an infinite expanse of delusion and justification, real is
Real
the
is the
scary.
scariest thing imaginable. That
Yeah,
sentence was like,
yeah, bro. And then this next one is actually even better. Real is to shatter to pieces everything that has ever allowed me to move forward, to breathe. Damn. That's kind of like just on that. That's kind of what I meant earlier when I was like I was speaking of this principle of like taking a step back from what you most value or what you believe you need the most, right? In order to actually again appreciate it for what it is. And at least at least it is my hope personally that somehow or other um this is what will happen for me, you
mhm.
know, going through my whatever this is right now, and then at some point just really see that Yeah, anyway, it just struck me in that way. I don't know if I just articulated myself very well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Real is small, real is weak, real is the need for shelter, and it is the admittance of finitude. Real is nakedness in its truest form. The realization of my very being lies not in the bolstering of myself as good and right and proper and just. It lies in the recognition that I never have been, I never will be, and I don't expect to be. And that is exactly, Jai, where you were saying like the humility element, right? Like you see these people having these insane levels of humility, and it seems so genuine. And it's because they've realized that shit, bro. It
Right.
lies in the recognition that I never have been, I never will be, and I don't expect to be.
Right.
So then, what other response can there be than genuine, heartfelt humility, right?
Right.
And so it is that spiritual pursuit has broken so many men. So many people who came to that precipice and found they didn't have the courage to die. They had not the courage to throw everything they know and everything they are into the fire, to stand naked in front of God as they truly are. And who can blame them? Because that's like, I mean, the way that he's worded that is so existentially intense. Like, but it's the truth,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
And who can blame them? Who can fault such a failure? How many of us have approached that light and shirked back into the darkness?
Yeah, absolutely.
How many of us have become fearful of that searing glares stripping away of all our excuses and rationalizations? Shit.
Yeah, this
Um,
phrase, having the courage to die, I one of an oft used image for, just self transformation is a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And the caterpillar has to pass through the chrysalis, and in the chrysalis, the body of the caterpillar is dissolved into like a soup of proteins and amino acids,
mm,
reconstituted as a butterfly.
mm,
So who in their right mind, their rational mind, that is to say, would choose to enter such a space
mm,
or to be dissolved in order to be reconstituted and made beautiful, but they have to go through that period? Who in their rational mind would choose to do so? And
mm.
so is it, as he's saying here, how is it surprising that we shirk back from such a possibility and not having the courage to do that, not having the courage to die, not having the courage to be real and to stand in full nakedness before God like that? Like, it makes sense that most would not be amenable to such a proposition.
Yeah, dude, because it's like I mean, I still kind of like some of my conditionings.
Oh,
Like I
100%.
it's like I have this I have like I Venus is exalted in my chart. So I have like very, shall we say, like cushy karma. Like I've just always been very comfortable and enjoyment comes to me super easily, and it's just like, and I'm like, shit, like I don't think I'm quite ready to put all of that aside. And then what? Like, so then what needs to happen? You just need to become disenchanted. And I mean, I maybe I'm in the process of realizing that somebody gave me this analogy of like, progress in life is kind of like an upward spiral, and then like at every point on the spiral, it's like you go through the same thing, but from like a slightly higher perspective,
Mm,
having gone through everything else like on the other parts of the spiral, and it's just, I mean, I guess maybe I'm in the process of realizing that it's not like you're not going to get you're not going to get disillusioned with the material energy just once. you know it's like, you're disillusioned now. I'm a devotee. I'm going to be a devotee for the rest of my life, and it's this seamless and beautiful
right.
linear path to liberation. It ain't that. It's like it winds, it winds, it goes, into all sorts of crevices and like dark spaces, and then you have to like go into a tunnel, and then you're walking through like knee deep shit, but the tunnel, you can't see the light because the tunnel winds, and then it's like that's spiritual life.
So, any signups? They're like, yeah, I'm good, homie. Later.
Okay, two more paragraphs, and it's so profound. So the final sentence of the previous one: how many of us have become fearful of that searing truth's glare, stripping away all of our excuses and rationalizations? Actually, it's so beautiful a truth. I haven't got to be good or right or righteous or strong. I simply have to be who I am and admit what that is. But then you really that's just occurring to me now. It's like, you really got to know like who you are. You got to know. And that takes time. That takes time to find, like you have to have I sometimes, oh, that's a whole tangent, but like you need to have a consolidated sense of identity, right?
Yes.
I simply have to be who I am and admit what that is. If I am a thief, I must stand before God and say, I am a thief. Please help me. I can give up trying to, well, maybe rather, I am a thief. Please help
Period.
me. You know? I can give up trying to prove to him that I am fit. I can simply sit down and say, I'm like this and I need help. Please kindly help me. But if I think I can make things work, if I still believe that somehow or other I'm going to make it myself, then I'm just prolonging the inevitable and showing myself for what I am, unwilling and ungrateful for such an amazing opportunity. Luckily, the people above us are not so petty as we. To my estimation, they have bodies composed of tolerance. They are just waiting for us to understand that we, the madmen that we are, simply must ask the right questions and stop trying to pretend. Jai, I think you should read that final paragraph because it's like, it's bomb.
A complete acceptance of oneself, be it as a righteous, orderly citizen, a criminal, or a saint with all consequences, is the sole prerequisite for a man to be able to lead a life as himself and then really be able to dedicate his life to God.
Yeah.
When the inner courage, the earnest, free daring is missing from the outset, right? The entire religious development is doomed to end up in a miserable desire to sneak away, an awful escapism and mental deformity. And this is the actual degradation to which the individuals and the churches, the sects, and the religious organizations have irretrievably given way in the West as well as in the East.
Swami Sadananda Ki Jai.
Right.
What really strikes,
this
yeah, yeah,
last
yeah,
this last paragraph. I mean, it's this last statement particularly very heavy. But he's saying here that I'm just gonna reread it. When the inner
yeah,
courage, the earnest, free daring is missing from the outset, the entire religious development is doomed to end up in a miserable desire to sneak away, an awful escapism, and
mm,
mental deformity. And this is
mm,
the actual degradation to which the individuals and the churches, the sects, and the religious organizations have irretrievably given way. I, I don't know if it's irretrievable for the individuals, but I do often wonder, or I do often tend to move towards the side of concluding that it might be irretrievable for the churches and the sects and the religious organizations. I think the
mm,
individual at any point in his sojourn can recognize
mm,
one's folly by the grace of words like this, by the grace of the impact of some advanced saintly person in their life and like change their course. But I think it's a
Mm.
lot harder for mass institutions and sects and churches and temples and so on to maybe make that adjustment. And so his phrase irretrievably seems more fair for the bigger thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
less fair for the individual who can always be helped at some point, provided he maybe suffers enough and gets a proper potent sangha.
Yeah.
And this is why earlier on although this was an aside for me, it's made me a lot reflective about the guru institution, so to speak.
Mm. Mm.
You have the hard institution, and as we try to apply it in ISKCON, I would say rather poorly. But then you have like the soft institution, like, hey, find out where your inspiration and faith is actually being built and surrender
Mm.
there. And then it's local, it's very practical, it's intimate, it's regular, like, probably day to day even. And I feel like individuals can be saved, so to speak, from the folly of just trying to be good as a justification for why they were never bad, but rather just be upbuilt out of the love of that person for them
Yeah,
and
bro.
so on.
I also feel that that is something that definitely like the guru institution, but I would speak more to like the guru principle, because I believe
Right.
that that is something that also happens very powerfully in like resonant peer groups.
Mm,
Like if you got a bunch of homies and you're all like on the same trajectory, or it's like if you have people that you trust that are perhaps just a little bit further along. I had this experience for the first like 7, 8 years of my spiritual life. I was always around friends who were really friends, but a little bit further along,
right.
just like a little bit more senior, a little bit more perspective, people that I could look up to. And
Right.
to me, that was really like the primary basis of my nourishment and inspiration in spiritual life. So I feel like, the society, do not expect the society to give you a community, right? Like finding a community is your responsibility. It's each
Right.
of our own responsibility, because you have to have resonant people around you. But for sure, Jai, like a kind of a, shall we say, like a grassroots guru movement, right? Of like, we need this. It needs to become individualized. This is the age of the individual. It's so clear. It's like you look at the West, it's just like, I mean, but then in the secular sense, like the excessive individualism, the sense of estrangement, that's like the kind of part, sort of like perverse side of it. But I feel like in our wider Krishna conscious society, we really have this, or we must in this age of the individual do this thing properly, and make it okay for people to be themselves. This phrase of, um I'm just going to read the whole quote, but then I'll emphasize the phrase: a complete acceptance of oneself, be it as a righteous orderly citizen, a criminal, or a saint, with all consequences, is the sole prerequisite, and here it comes, for a man to be able to lead a life as himself. Damn. And then really be able to dedicate his life to God. And that makes me think of that book Falling Upwards, right? Like establishing what he calls the conventional identity, like knowing who the hell you are, bro. That is important. Like, what is this conditioning that you're sitting in, because if you don't like, if we don't face it, if we don't fully like, if we don't face it, it's just, and we try to run from it, it's just going to keep coming back and biting us in the ass.
No.
Like, how
I had
else can it be?
I had a friend. I was in Bridge. This is a few years back, probably 2017 maybe. Um,
Mm,
I had one friend. He was over at Jiva Institute, and he was trying to get initiation from Babaji over there. And he's like, kind of hippie kid. He joined the Hare Krishna movement in America somewhere, and they didn't really have an identity. He dropped out of high school, didn't really work, He didn't really have any identity, so anything would have been good for him, you know. So he joined the Hare.
Mm.
Okay, I'll do the Hare Krishna thing, and then finally started to find he was interested in Sanskrit, and he ended up in the Jiva Institute. So he wanted to take initiation, and he was learning about what initiation is, and you have to surrender. So we were going on Braj Parikram together one day, and we stayed together in the ashram in Chicago. That's how we knew each other. And then we're
Uh-huh.
going on Braj Parikram one day, and he was asking me about initiation. He was telling he was interested. So I was like, "Well, what's up? What's going on?" He was like, "Well, Babaji told me that I can't surrender because I don't have any ego. Because I haven't built up any practical ego, I can't actually surrender." He said, He said, surrender only becomes possible after you have some ego that you have to really let go of. He said,
You
but
don't
because you
got
haven't
shit
built,
to surrender, bro.
yeah, you ain't got nothing. So he wouldn't give him initiation. Just like he's like, you got to build your ego, your sense of identity. Otherwise, what are you
Yeah.
actually surrendering to? It's just like,
Damn.
okay, I'll do this for some time before I do the other thing. And although I don't know how true that is, maybe in the ultimate scheme of things, I thought it was a very interesting insight. That yeah, how this, like you're saying, the phrase that you're quoting, the ego to come as you are, and
Mm.
then and say this is what I am, and then surrender to God. I find that there's like some real wisdom in that, and you could say the opposite is certainly seen in our spiritual communities, not only Hare Krishna but the world over, where people come without that, and then it becomes this like very strange thing.
Yeah,
Um,
because what happens is people come, they don't have a consolidated sense of identity, and then ISKCON's like, yeah, this is how you dress, this is how
right.
you eat, this is how you speak, this is how you
So
wear
they
your
little
hair.
word,
You
yeah.
know, it's like here you go. We're handing you an identity, right? But then how long can that last?
It doesn't last forever, and that's the grace of God, and that's why I say I don't know
Failure
about
is
the
God.
yeah, failure is God, and that's why I say I don't know about the ultimate truth of needing to have ego. I think being gifted an ego like that to start your journey in bhakti can be a glorious thing, and
Mm.
and then but it's going to fail at some point because it's not truly authentic, and
Yeah,
that's where
it's
that's failures.
yeah,
That's the beauty of the failure, actually. That
yeah,
now, okay, now it's time to like level up, move a little bit
yeah.
deeper, and you've got something now. Now it's time to surrender more. So I think
Mm.
there's beauty in that also. Um, yeah,
I could
I
just
think.
tell you one thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. What do you want to say? You go, you
I
go.
wanted to say that I feel that this episode was really nice. Actually, this
Dude.
conversation. I mean, from where we started
Oh my
to
god.
where it's
It's
gone, it's been very
yeah.
beautiful actually and cathartic, I would say. Because
Oh man,
we were like
absolutely.
so nervous. We were like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna say. It's kind of weird. It's just us. Can we really hold the space? And
Yeah, man. I feel like internally I've made like a complete 180. Like I feel so like just fulfilled. Like what a wonderful conversation. And wait, I had one thought pertaining to that also, but now it slipped my mind. I did want to say though, you know, this this journey that we're all on in our own way, um of like trying to figure out who we are pertaining to our conditioning, like building that ego as a necessary prerequisite to be able to surrender, like doing that, going through that process, but then still trying to remain true to what we value spiritually, and trying to find somehow or other that like genuine inspiration, that unrelenting curiosity. Everyone does it so because everyone is a person. That's that. God, we have a personalist philosophy. Everyone is a distinct individual, everyone is a distinct person. And so it is highly personal, the way that it actually happens. I just want to say, though, just like, a little report from like, Station Karuna here is like, in my case, like, oh God, I'm such an extremist. Like, dude, like, my like range of like just like emotional experience, like it's just like it just goes so far this way and so far that way, and then like my pendulum is also like, I mean, it practically, anyway, I'm being dramatic now, but it's just like it's hella intense. Like anyway, please pray for me that like my pendulum is gonna like start balancing out before I'm 60, you know, because like yeah, it's intense. But you know, at the same time, like I also do want to say that um despite like despite whatever the considerations are, like I do feel very content. You know, I came to the States and I did have a very powerful experience of being like, um I do love the devotees and I do appreciate them, and specific, you know, individuals, Jai, you being one of them. And these friendships that we have in spiritual life, like that is the real gold, you know. That's really where it's at for me, at
Yeah.
least. And I feel like that's probably going to be my saving grace at the end of the day, is just like these relationships. Because bro, like shit gets heavy in the world and you like fall on your face, like where are you gonna go? You're gonna go to your friends in bhakti, man. Like like what other refuge is there truly?
Yes. Um, I wanted to share some Prabhupada words with you. Just
Mm,
this very point that you make, and maybe it's a proper closing out spot. But just before I say that, Jiva Goswami in the Bhakti Sandarbha, he says, because bhakti comes from sadhu sangha, and bhakti is the abhideya, the means by which we attain or actualize our experience of reality. He says, because that bhakti, which is the abhideya, comes from sadhu sangha, he says sadhu sangha is itself the abhideya. He said, we should say that sadhu sangha
yeah.
is the abhideya. And that sentence has stuck with me since I first read it, some like maybe almost 10 years ago. And just like, yeah, and just the sentence is brought up for me when you're saying just my appreciation and my journey in America for devotees and where you're gonna go. So Prabhupada to
Mm,
this is from Bhagavad Gita 331. Another, I have my go-to phrases when I'm feeling a little down and in my spiritual life that I take shelter of. So Krishna is saying here, speaking about the people who execute his instructions in karma yoga. So this is Krishna speaking. He says, those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. So Prabhupada, commenting on this point about without envy, he writes this amazing sentence. Um, in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will
mm,
surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness.
mm.
I always really found a lot of hope in that.
Where is that again?
This is 331 Bhagavad Gita.
Ah,
So Prabhupada speaking there.
Jay.
In the beginning, he may not be able to do it, but because he is not resentful of this principle and he works
Mm,
sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness. Okay, I'm a failure on this front, but failure as God is now hopeless. He will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. I always appreciated that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I think, you know, what is definitely striking us both internally today, I think I can speak for you also, is that like let me speak for myself. Like one thing I sure as hell can do is bring this podcast to the people, you know. And I think, you know, we yeah, I feel super inspired. I feel super inspired. That's all I
Yeah.
want to say.
This
Yeah.
conversation surprised me.
Dude,
Way
like
hold it.
guys, I mean, I was like tripping balls, you know, before this. I was
But you were
really
tripping
like,
balls. I took a midnight flight from Cali, Colombia. I arrived at 6:30. I'm in the middle seat on the flight, so I can't properly rest.
oof,
And I dosed. I've been up, and then I finally dozed off at like 10:45
oh
or
my
10. No,
god, and the podcast started
and,
at noon.
and so yeah, not 10. I dozed off at 11:15. So I was like, okay, a half hour. I woke up and I felt like death. Like I'm like
Ah,
I'm going to die. And then I got on and I was like, oh my god, I'm looking like death, and I can't. I don't know if I can do this. And then the conversation just unfolded in like a very magical way. I don't know. I guess it's in that. I guess that are both our visceral experience is kind of confirming what we've been reading and hearing about. You
Yeah.
know, we on our own strength, we were like, it's a no for us. We can't do it right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
somehow in that humility, like grace came in, and it
Yeah.
had the space to do its magic because we had surrendered doership over the conversation. Like we can't do shit right now. We're emotionally all over the place. We're physically not all together. So Grace was like,
Power.
finally, I have the room to do my magic without them like interfering with it. And so then we can be surprised, like, wow, how did this conversation unfold so seamlessly?
Yeah. I mean, also like just thinking back to, our first year of doing it, like, bro, like especially for you, like how many times were you like before like and then like we do it and it's like it's always so wonderful and so rewarding. Anyway, our next episode is probably going to be with Kishore Chandra, and we're going to speak about like some, just kind of like the reality of being a queer person in spiritual life. I don't know if you would want to frame that differently, introductorily, Jai.
No,
Yeah.
we're still exploring how we're going to frame it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just an interesting.
Yeah.
Our podcast is about masculinity, and so you have this sort of very strange, you can call it intersection, I guess, of like traditional masculinity, how we even think about traditional masculinity, and then this sort of like anomaly of like the gay man, or it's just like a very strange thing. It's something that
Uh-huh.
I personally like. Karuna's been wanting to talk about this since the very first year doing the podcast. I resisted it like strongly because I was like, hey, the people who will hear our podcast, they're largely heterosexual. We want to bring content that could be helpful for our community. They're largely
Mm,
heterosexual men and women,
mm.
honestly. So Karuna, he acquiesced to my understanding at the time. But this is an anomaly that isn't, it's an anomaly that's not so anomalous anymore. And
Dude,
I'm getting
yeah.
loads of messages from gay men and women,
Yeah.
especially during the Pride Month. I got more letters from gay men and women than I've ever gotten ever. And it seems like, okay, maybe this is the right time to have a conversation about this, even though I've resisted it this so far. So it's going to be an interesting one. Um,
Yeah. We gotta.
I feel like I get a sense that we're going to get a lot of people joining in on the live for that, just to like, some to police what's being said, some to,
Ah,
hurrah, hurrah. And
whatever.
it'll be I
Whatever.
think it could be a fun thing.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. I mean, I'll also say it's also like I'll say here that I did notice, like, as Pride Month was unfolding, and even maybe a little bit before, like I did notice you also, like, on your socials, just contemplating issues in that space a lot, with a lot more kind of like interest and investment, and that was an interesting observation for me, because I hadn't sort of like seen your curiosity or your interest go in that direction before. And I think maybe also that sort of like deeper immersion that you went through is also going to be informing the conversation, interestingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Jai ho. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us live. Prem Vilas and Radhika Vindaji, and I think Bhishma Dev is here also, and Guru Charna Padma. Thank you so much for coming. Everyone who Nam was here too. Kelly, thank you so much for being here. Anjali, she was here also with us. Yeah, so thank you for coming and supporting us live. Jai, we were talking about, should we just sometimes do like pre-recorded episodes and stuff, but I don't know, there's just something to it. There's something to like coming here and then knowing that people are here sort of like sharing the experience in the moment. So anyway, I'm just grateful to everybody. Saragrahi, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. All right, Hare Krishna. We will soon announce when the next episode will be. Probably
Yes.
probably 2 weeks. Yeah, like two
No, next
weeks.
week.
What did we say? Next week. Okay.
Normally we were doing every 2 weeks, but we wanted to get some energy going, so we just decided to do this episode today. But our guest can come next week, so we're gonna do next week also.
Okay.
So it'll be
Excellent. So
next week.
next week, same time. That will be noon EST.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Jai ho. Okay, well, rest well, bro. Now you can really rest with like peace of heart and mind, you know?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Hare
All right,
Krishna.
bye. Love you.
Love you well.